Okay, we are going to go back to some square roots. Let's say, for instance, you don't know 144, square root of 140 is 12, but let's say we can break it down. 4 times what? I don't know off the top of my head. So 3, 2, 4, so 36. So now, much easier, we've got 2, we've got 6. 2 times 6 is 12, which, if you knew it, you could jump right to there, but let's see if you didn't know it. So today, though, is take things like that. We're going to take a square root, we're going to add in a variable. Or we might add in multiple variables, so on and so forth. When we do square roots, it's what number times itself. So square is what power? 2. So if we rewrote this, we could rewrite it with a little 2 here. If there's no number, it's assumed that it's square roots 2. Later, in future times, you'll get into them where they have a 3 there. Today, we're just doing the square roots. So again, if there's no number, it's assumed that it's 2. Or that's going to be important for the power. So the first part, what's the square root of 36? 6. Now for the powers, what we do is we take our power here that we have and divide it by this square root. So what is 2 divided by 2? 1. So we get y to the first or just y. So our answer, the square root of 36y squared is 6y. Let's just keep doing several of those. 16x to the 4th, we could have multiple variables. Again, if there's nothing there, it's assumed to be 2. So we do the square root of 16. 4. 4 divided by 2 is, so we get x squared. 8 divided by 2, y to the 4th. So basically, you are just cutting it in half every single time. Let's do one more just like that. 25x 10y 6. Square root of 25 is 5. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Y divided by 2 is 3. So we cut our power in half. But your question might be, let's say it's an odd number. So we start here, square root of 49 is 7. But we take 9 divided by 2. How many times will 2 go in there evenly? It'll go in 4, but we have 1 left over, don't we? So if we have 1 left over, we leave that odd one inside. So here's like a 1. You don't have to write the 1, but we'll leave the 1 inside. So if you have an odd number, half of it comes out. So basically, we could rewrite it as x to the 8th, x to the 1st. Let me write that bigger. So x to the 8th, x to the 1st, 49. So if we break it down, this gets us 7. This gets us to the x to the 4th. This does not break down. So that 1, every time you have the 1 left over, it stays inside. So let's do a couple more like that. 25x 7 y 5. So square root of 25. 5. X will go break, that's closest to 6. Half of 6 is 3. But we've got 1 left over, and it's going to be inside. That goes to 4. Half of 4 is 2. And we're left with 1 inside. So this is our simplified answer. What happens? Got a couple different ways we can do that. So 8y 5. So 20. It's not a perfect square, but we can break it down. 4 times 5. Correct? So square root of 4 is what? 2. 5 is going to be inside. X to the 8th is even, so it breaks down to x to the 4th. And you have no x's left inside. X to the 5th is basically like x to the 4th, x to the 1st. X to the 4th gets us x squared. And then this one's going to stay inside. So we've made it simpler. Is it smaller? Is it really big? Not really, but we've simplified it. Okay. Like we said, part of why we simplify it is for later on, if you have more of them that have this square root of radical 5y, we could combine them just like we would do with x's. Okay, and the last thing we're gonna do with this. We talked about this briefly. We started square roots. X squared equals 16. In order to solve this, to get rid of the square, we're gonna do this opposite. Just like when we divide, we multiply. So the opposite of square root, or square, is square root. So the square and the square root cancel. But now this is where we include the positive, negative. Because going back, how many answers does it say we should get? 2, because of our power. So what number times itself is 16? 4 or -4. So we're going to write it just like that. If it's just like this, our answer is just going to be 4. But if it's one where it's an equation and it tells us how many solutions, we're going to write both the positive and the negative. It won't always already be solved for x squared. So we need to get that variable by itself. How can we get rid of times it? Divide. So we divide both sides. That did not go in evenly, and that's fine. Leave it as a fraction. But how do we get rid of our square? Square root. Remember we said we could rewrite this as square root of 64 over square root of 9. So square root of 64 is 8. 3, we did 2 answers, so it's positive or negative. X equals. All right. So we're doing with the variables where you're breaking down the square root, and we're going to do some where you're solving the equations. So on 526, 13 to 35 odd. 13 to 35 odd, 526.